we want to talk about why it's maybe going wrong. Abbi, let me come to you. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about the problems that Man United are having right now? And I think in particular, it feels like Erik ten Hag is the one getting the heat.
Yeah, and I think it is rightly so. Don't get me wrong, I think that there is multiple factors as to why United are in the situation they're in. But you bring in Ten Hag, decent enough season last year. You win a trophy, top 4 finish, everything looks okay. I don't think he had particularly much of a blueprint as to the way that he was playing. I think Rashford had these purple patches that kind of saw them across the line at some point, and maybe just because of how poor the rest of the pack might have been in terms of Liverpool doing a little bit of a late catch-up, it did relieve a little bit of pressure from him. And you walked away and said they've had a decent season, including all the stuff they had going off the pitch. But he spent a lot of money on Anthony, Lisandro Martinez, Onana, Casemiro, Mason Mount, Højlund. Lots of money spent on these players. And I look at them and I think, do I really want many people in my Spurs side that are from that United squad? Not massively. Would I have spent 65 million on Mason Mount? No. Would I have spent 70 million on Højlund, who I do think is a diamond in the rough and will come good? But when I add up the 65 million for Mason Mount and the 70 million for Højlund, if I'm a United fan, I think, why didn't we just go and get Harry Kane and have one player that would have massively helped us in terms of putting the ball in the back of the net and also being creative? And he's gone and bought these people and these players that he trusts. Yet he sits there and he says he can't implement the style of play that he did at Ajax. He can't play that same way. Well, a lot of these players were under him at Ajax.
Yeah.
So I don't get it.
So let's come back to recruitment in a second, but I want to talk about maybe the lifespan of a manager, certainly a manager at Manchester United, because I think there have been other managers that have had a first season that's gone okay. Mourinho comes to mind. I think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer did okay initially, and then it started to turn and get a little bit ugly. In terms of that lifespan, sort of two things. I guess we can get to the recruitment. And for me, the big thing is it's not even the players you've brought in. It kind of is. It's the players that you haven't let go. It's the mix of the two. But I remember you saying, Nubaid, on this show a year ago when Marcus Rashford was on fire and Man United were looking good and winning, the League Cup. You felt like they were running hot at that moment in time. So what is the truth? Has he kind of almost built a rod for his own back in doing so well last season? And now obviously struggling with it, or should you put those two things aside to each other?
I think when we talk about football, people can sometimes forget there's so many other factors. So Abbi just touched on the fact that last season Liverpool had fallen off, Chelsea were in transition as they are now, Spurs weren't the Spurs they are now. So there's a lot of factors as to why Manchester United ended up doing as well as they did. And on top of that, Rashford was in this wonderful run of form. The point I was making a year ago, which still stands now, is there's still a lack of style. And it's non-sustainable to rely on Marcus Rashford. And the Wolves game comes to mind, where I think he was started as a sub. He came on, he hustled through 2 defenders and put it in their post. That is not a coaching strategy. That's not a plan. That's not something Ten Hag has inspired. That's Marcus Rashford just on a decent run of form. Now we're seeing he's out of form, Bruno's out of form. Suddenly people are now questioning the same characters that they have been previously. I just think, and as I said then, as I'm saying now, there's a lack of style. And the fact that when we will talk about his personality a little bit, Ten Hag can turn around and say, we'll never play the style that we did at Ajax. I have to now work with the players I have here. He spent 411 million. I don't think you can do that.
Now, the injuries is one thing, because 3 of the starting back 4 don't seem to be either be available or aren't being used for whatever reasons there may be. You add sort of leaks into this. The fact that Manchester United are such a talking point always, so when it is going wrong, there is a lot of conversation over that. But that style of play, that's why I kind of link up with the lifespan thing, is that it felt very individual last year. But prior to that, when it was going well for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, it felt quite individual there as well. And I wanted Ten Hag as the right option for Man United. And the reason for that was I saw what he'd done at Ajax. You see the synergy between a football club like Ajax and Man United. And you go, we'll come over there and do it with a better budget and with more player pull and things like that. When you get to this point and you look at that squad and he then goes, I can't play the way that I wanted. It is a nonsense for me, because the style of play is just it. Even if you start there and then start to build the blocks, I think Man United fans would be able to live with that a little bit better. But they are not dominating games of football. They're having a lot of shots, but the reason they're having a lot of shots is because of the game state, and they're sort of getting points late. People will turn to the table and go, look, they're only a couple of points off Newcastle. I think they've had easier games, and some of these games Wolves, Sheffield United, Brentford are games where they kind of got out of jail. And one big stat for me, I think, is in terms of shot creating actions, they've got 203, which isn't too bad. It's 5th in the league. But in terms of goal creating actions from live passes, from open play, 15. Let's put that into comparison with Brighton. 206 shots, shot creating actions, from live passes. They've got 206, Man United got 203. They've got 28 goals from that. So again, in terms of that pattern of play, there's no clear understanding of how you unlock the opposition, and that is totally on Ten Hag.
I think there's two things that you've just touched on there that really spring to mind. One, about this style of play, Ten Hag's building this team around Bruno Fernandez and Rashford again. Neither of these two players are possession-based players. They're both transitional players, and that's not a bad thing. That's just a feature in how they play. So when you make Bruno Fernandez your captain, you make Rashford your star man, what's going to happen? You're going to be more effective playing sort of transitional football. The other side to that is whenever you look at Manchester United in big games, they never impose themselves on the game. Yeah. And I think there's constantly a comparison of Arteta and Ten Hag. Arteta, even in his first season, you could see he was trying to play a style. They just didn't have the players to execute the style.
But I would suggest that in terms of what he wants to, and we've all spoken about this transition thing that he said himself. So if you say it, then you're going to have to live by it. For me, that a transitional team in 2023, I think is a Liverpool, right? But even Liverpool control the game. If you want to be one of the best teams in the league, you have to be able to control a game of football. And you just never see that.
If you want to play transitional football, you don't buy Onana, you don't buy Lisandro Martinez. There's just like his signings that he really wanted don't match up with what potentially he might want to be doing.
Yeah, and I think someone like Mason Mount, I think he's getting a hard ride here, because I think if you do have a really good system there, if he goes to Arsenal, I think he's having a much better time than he is at Man United. The amount of times he's showing for the ball, he's not an individual player. He's not a Rashford or a Bruno Fernandez. He wants to work with the other players around him, but he's not able to do that. Let's talk about his sort of man management then. Because one thing that I do have sympathy for is that when it's not going well and you're Man United manager, what are you supposed to say to get yourself out of it?
I mean, I would probably suggest saying more than I don't know what to do with this squad. I don't think it comes across particularly well to the fan base. I mean, you tell me on that.
Well, I think the thing is, they have what you say and what you see have to click. And so just going last year, so this is the thing with Ten Hag as well. Last year, it's kind of quite cold who has high standards, and everyone was like, finally. Because
United needed it.
Yeah, we've got these little rascals running about. They need some standards. That was provided to them. And so when he goes, this isn't good enough, we need to be better, that's fine, like in the first 6 weeks, first season. But getting into the second season, we can't see it. That is the thing I keep going back to. I can't see it.
The problem is, like, a lot of what he said initially was like amazing because we've come with ambition. He said about the eras comment that keeps getting used against him. But then when you don't back it on the pitch, everything you say will now work against you.
Completely.
And so in this situation, we're just speaking about his man management. I just think you make a point at Manchester United, yes, you have to talk. I just think you have to talk more sensibly. Yeah. There's a moment before the Man City game where he's asked about Varane and he said, tactically, I preferred Evans. Now, if I'm Rafa Varane, I've won so many competitions in my career. I am probably the best box defender in this team. And the gaffer's saying to me out of nowhere that I'm going to get replaced by a guy that we actually didn't want to sign and sort of were forced to sign. No disrespect to Johnny Evans.
Did sell, re-signed 5 years later at an older age. I mean, it just doesn't work like that. You can't turn around and say, I chose Johnny Evans over Varane for a tactical reason. It just doesn't work.
But even if you did, I just think you say Varane's unwell. And no one says anything after that.
Just give yourself a chance.
Yeah, I also think, and I know that Bruno Fernandez has been, a very good player and an important player to United. But for me, I look at that and I don't see a captain. I never have done. I think that you can have an attack-minded captain. Don't get me wrong, but he is not the player for me that picks, the team up by the scruff of the neck and is going to get them over the line all the time. He's moaning, his arms are in the air. We've known that of Bruno, and I think the biggest problem with United is that you don't have a leader. And I can say that from a Spurs perspective as well. Last season, I looked at that squad and I said there is no one in here that cares enough about the badge and this current system and this current Conte formation and structure we've got here that is going to really carry us over the line. And I look at United, and I saw against City, I thought there is no one here that cares enough to pull this team over the line. It is all individuals just trying, either playing, whether it's a move away, whether it's, just for themselves to get free of this manager. I don't think on a man management standpoint, the way he's handled Jadon Sancho, I don't think that situation has been handled correctly either, regardless if there's an apology or not. I really don't. So I think there is a lot of factors that, yes, there are things that go on and off the pitch with, within United, and we all know what those things are, whether it's the board or, allegations and accusations against team members. But I do think that the buck does stop with Erik ten Hag, and I don't see that as a squad that is playing for that manager.
The one question I have on that point is, there's so many things wrong at Manchester United that, yes, the buck lies with the manager and his decisions, but Bruno Fernandez is an example of sort of the situation he's been left in. If it isn't Bruno's as captain, who does he captain? And if Ten Hag isn't there, who do they get?
Well, I always said I thought it was Casemiro's the right choice, because I think the great thing with Casemiro is you don't know what his English is like, so he might not come out and talk, which I think could be the best thing for Man United. The captaincy thing for me, you took it off Maguire because it was a storyline. You've given it to Bruno Fernandez and allowed it to be a storyline. That's why he shouldn't have been captain, more than anything else for me.